Elvis Presley once flew on a private jet from Memphis to Denver just to get a sandwich. He shot his television screen multiple times because he didn't like the performer on it. The king of rock and roll sometimes engaged in full-blown firecracker wars inside luxury hotels. His entourage once had to deal with a chimpanzee that developed a drinking problem and trashed hotel rooms. Elvis frequently rented out entire amusement parks and movie theaters just for himself and his friends after hours. Number 9. The night the TV remote was actually a Thickery 157 Magnum. Picture this. You're chilling at Graceland, maybe watching some late-night TV with the king himself. It's relaxed, comfortable, just another evening in the inner circle. Elvis is reclining, maybe sipping a soda, eyes on the screen. Then a certain singer appears. Maybe it's Robert Goulet, maybe Mel Torme. Accounts vary slightly depending on who's telling the story, but the core remains the same. Elvis just didn't care for them at all. Now, most people might grumble, maybe change the channel, or just leave the room. Not Elvis. According to several Memphis Mafia members, including Joe Esposito and Lamar Fike, Elvis had a much more direct approach to dealing with performers he disliked invading his living room via the television set. On one particular occasion, as the offending singer began to croon, Elvis reportedly narrowed his eyes. There wasn't necessarily a big outburst of anger, more like a calm, decisive action. He reached over, not for the remote control, but for one of the handguns he often kept nearby. Graceland was apparently quite well armed. Members of the group present might have tensed up, knowing what could happen, but perhaps not expecting it right then. Without much fanfare, Elvis raised the gun, took aim at the television screen, and bang. The screen, sparks might have flown. The offending singer was silenced mid-note. Imagine the gunshot echoing in the den, the tinkle of broken glass, followed by silence. Elvis, according to the stories, would then calmly put the gun down, perhaps with a satisfied nod or a simple comment like, "That's taken care of." For the Memphis Mafia guys watching, it was likely a mix of shock, even if they'd seen similar things before, and perhaps suppressed amusement. It wasn't about rage, necessarily, more about Elvis exercising ultimate control over his environment. If he didn't like what was on his TV in his house, he'd simply eliminate it. Problem solved. The next step. Someone would quietly arrange for the busted TV to be replaced, often the very next day. It became just another accepted, albeit startling, part of life around the king. They learned quickly Elvis was the real remote control. And sometimes it had a heck of a kickback. The cleanup crew must have had some stories to tell, too. Just imagine explaining that repair order. Number 8. Operation Fool's Gold Loaf, an 800-mile sandwich run. Elvis had cravings, big ones. And when the king wanted something specific, distance was merely a suggestion. One of the most legendary food-related tales involves a sandwich of epic proportions called the Fool's Gold Loaf, served at the Colorado Mine Company restaurant in Denver. This wasn't your average deli sandwich. We're talking a whole hollowed-out loaf of sourdough bread stuffed with an entire jar of peanut butter an entire jar of grape jelly, and a solid pound of bacon. Yes, a pound of bacon. It was estimated to contain somewhere between 8,000 and 42,000 calories, depending on who you ask. A snack fit for a king, perhaps. One night, likely in 1976, Elvis was at Graceland reminiscing with some Memphis Mafia members, including Jerry Schilling, though details sometimes mention Captain Jerry Kennedy of the Denver police force being involved in the initial telling of the sandwich story to Elvis. Talk turned to this mythical Denver sandwich. Suddenly, reminiscing wasn't enough. Elvis needed a fool's gold loaf right then, right there. Did he sigh and wish Denver were closer? Did he try to find a local substitute? Absolutely not. According to the story, Elvis decided they were going to Denver immediately. He roused his companions, called the airport, and arranged for his private jet, the Lisa Marie, to be prepared. So, in the middle of the night, Elvis Presley, Joe Esposito, Jerry Schilling, and a couple of others boarded the luxurious jet and flew roughly 800 miles from Memphis to Denver. They didn't even bother booking hotel rooms. The plane landed at Stapleton International Airport in Denver. Word had apparently been sent ahead, possibly via their Denver police connections. The owners of the Colorado Mine Company, Buck and Cindy Scott, reportedly met the plane personally right there on the tarmac, carrying not just one but several of these behemoth fools' Gold Loaves, along with cases of Perrier water and champagne. Elvis and his crew didn't even leave the airport hangar. They sat right there, probably using the airplane's facilities or a private lounge area, and tucked into the sandwiches. Imagine the scene. The king of rock and roll, thousands of feet away from home, in an airport hangar in the dead of night, devouring this monstrous concoction of peanut butter jelly and bacon. They reportedly spent a couple of hours eating, chatting, and enjoying their impulsive feast before thanking the restaurant owners profusely. Elvis apparently picked up the tab for the food, a sum in the thousands when considering the effort. Then, mission accomplished, they simply boarded the Lisa Marie again and flew straight back to Memphis, arriving home before sunrise, all for a sandwich. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the whim, the power to make it happen, and the shared adventure. For the Memphis Mafia, it was another example of Elvis's larger-than-life spontaneity and his ability to turn a simple craving into an unforgettable escapade. It cost a fortune, involved crossing state lines, and required mobilizing a private jet crew, all for a snack. But when Elvis wanted peanut butter jelly and a pound of bacon, the world rearranged itself to deliver. Number 7. The Great Hotel Firecracker War of '75. Elvis loved toys, especially noisy ones. Fireworks, firecrackers, cherry bombs, they were a source of endless amusement for him, and by extension his entourage. This love for pyrotechnics often led to elaborate, and sometimes dangerous, practical jokes and wars, particularly when they were cooped up in hotels during tours. One specific incident, often recounted by members like Lamar Fike, Red West, and Sonny West, supposedly took place during a tour stop, possibly in Las Vegas or maybe Lake Tahoe, around the mid-1970s. Elvis and the guys had taken over a significant portion of a hotel floor. Boredom might have set in, or perhaps just the usual restless energy that surrounded the king needed an outlet. Whatever the trigger, Elvis decided it was time for some action. Firecracker. Action. It often started small. Maybe someone lit a string of black cats and tossed them down the hallway. Then someone else retaliated. But with Elvis involved, things tended to escalate quickly. Soon, entire bricks of firecrackers were being detonated. Cherry bombs, known for their louder bang, might have made an appearance. Hallways filled with smoke, the air thick with the smell of gunpowder. The noise would have been deafening, echoing explosions, shouts, laughter. Imagine being a regular hotel guest on that floor, or even the floor above or below. You'd hear what sounds like a war zone erupting just outside your door. Hotel security would inevitably be called, sometimes repeatedly. According to some accounts, Elvis, with his charm and clout and perhaps a generous tip, could often smooth things over. Security might be persuaded to look the other way, or at least give them a warning, which might or might not be heeded. Lamar Fike, known for his size and sometimes grumpy demeanor, though often playing along, was a frequent target or participant. Stories tell of firecrackers being thrown under his door, or him retaliating with his own barrage. Red and Sonny West, with their background in stunts and security, were likely deep in the fray. Joe Esposito might have been trying to maintain some semblance of order, or maybe he was tossing a few firecrackers himself. These weren't just a few pops and bangs. We're talking sustained barrages, coordinated attacks between rooms, hallways littered with red paper casings and debris. It was chaotic, juvenile, and potentially hazardous. Risk of fire, injuries, property damage. But for Elvis and the guys, it was apparently hilarious fun. It broke the monotony of the road, reaffirmed their camaraderie. Us against the world, or at least us against the boredom, and let Elvis be the mischievous ringleader. The aftermath often involved significant cleanup costs and possibly some hefty bills for damages or inconvenience fees paid to the hotel, all quietly handled by Elvis's management. For the Memphis Mafia, it was just another wild night on tour, a story to laugh about later, the time they turned a luxury hotel into a mock battlefield, using nothing but cheap fireworks and Elvis's insatiable appetite for boyish mayhem. It's a wonder they weren't banned from every hotel chain in America. Number 6. Scatter the Drunken Chimpanzee and His Reign of Terror. Elvis loved animals, but his taste sometimes leaned towards the exotic. One of the most infamous non-human members of the extended Graceland family was Scatter, a chimpanzee. Elvis acquired possibly in the late 1950s or early 1960s. Scatter wasn't just any chimp. He was apparently quite intelligent, mischievous, and eventually a bit of a problem child. Initially, Scatter was a source of great amusement. Elvis dressed him in custom-made suits, taught him tricks, and generally treated him like one of the guys. The Memphis Mafia members were essentially Scatter's handlers and playmates. He would ride bikes, mimic the guys, and pull pranks. According to stories shared by various members like Alan Fortas and Marty Lacker, Scatter was often part of the backstage chaos during shows or movie shoots. However, Scatter developed some bad habits, allegedly picked up from his human companions. He reportedly developed a taste for alcohol. Some stories claim the guys deliberately gave him drinks, finding his drunken antics funny. Others suggest Scatter just started sneaking sips whenever he could. Regardless of how it started, a tipsy or drunk chimpanzee proved to be even more unpredictable and destructive than a sober one. Scatter's behavior became increasingly problematic. He had a penchant for pulling women's skirts up, which might have seemed funny initially, but quickly became inappropriate and embarrassing. He would bite people, sometimes requiring stitches for the victim. He caused significant property damage. There are tales of Scatter completely trashing hotel rooms, swinging from curtains, breaking lamps, throwing things, generally creating mayhem that far surpassed even the firecracker wars. One specific story involves Scatter being let loose during a stuffy Hollywood party or meeting. Predictably, he caused utter chaos, embarrassing Elvis and infuriating studio executives or producers. His unpredictable nature made him a liability, especially when Elvis's public image was concerned. The Memphis Mafia guys were often left to deal with the fallout, cleaning up his messes, placating angry hotel managers, trying to control an increasingly unruly primate. What started as a fun novelty became a genuine headache. Scatter's drinking problem apparently worsened, and his behavior became more aggressive and less comical. Eventually, Scatter's reign of terror had to end. The exact details of his departure are a bit murky. Some accounts say he was sent back to a zoo or animal sanctuary. Others mention him being kept more securely at Graceland before eventually passing away. The humorous anecdotes about Scatter often carry a darker undertone, highlighting the chaos and sometimes poor judgment that could accompany Elvis's whims. Scatter the chimpanzee remains a legendary, if cautionary tale from the Graceland menagerie, a furry, booze-loving symbol of a time when almost anything seemed possible, and often was, in Elvis's world. Trying to explain Scatter's bar tab must have been a unique accounting challenge. Number 5. Renting the fairground because Elvis wanted to ride the Dodgins. Elvis Presley never really outgrew his love for simple fun. Roller coasters, bumper cars, arcade games, he enjoyed them immensely. The problem was, by the time he became the king of rock and roll, casually visiting a public amusement park was impossible. He'd be mobbed instantly. His solution: rent the entire park. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. According to numerous accounts from Memphis Mafia members like Jerry Schilling and George Klein, Elvis frequently rented out the local Memphis amusement park, Libertyland, or its predecessor, the Mid-South Fairgrounds, after it closed to the public for the night. Imagine the scene. It's past midnight. The park gates are locked. The lights are dimmed. The usual crowds are long gone. Then Elvis and his entourage pull up. The park lights blaze back to life. The rides are fired up. The concession stands might even be open just for them, stocked with popcorn, cotton candy, and Elvis's favorite snacks, like Eskimo pies. For several hours, Elvis and the Memphis Mafia guys, along with their girlfriends or wives, and sometimes other friends, had the entire amusement park to themselves. They could ride the Zippin' Pippin' roller coaster, reportedly Elvis's favorite, over and over again, without waiting in line. They could crash into each other with abandon on the Dodgem cars, bumper cars, a particular favorite for letting off steam and engaging in some friendly physical rivalry. They could play arcade games, try their luck at midway stalls, and generally act like kids again, free from the usual pressures and watchful eyes of the public. Jerry Schilling, in his book, Me and a Guy Named Elvis, described these nights as pure, unadulterated fun. It was a chance for Elvis to relax, to laugh, and to share a relatively normal experience, albeit in an extraordinary way, with his closest friends. The guys loved it too. Who wouldn't want a private amusement park playground? There were stories of Elvis challenging the guys to shooting gallery contests, engaging in epic bumper car battles that left everyone sore from laughing and bumping, and daring each other to ride the fastest or highest rides. Sometimes, the sessions would last until dawn. The cost of renting an entire amusement park for a private party, even for a few hours, would have been substantial. Operating the rides, paying the staff overtime, the electricity, it all added up. But for Elvis, the price was worth the freedom and the joy it brought him and his friends. It was another perk of being the king, and another surreal experience for the Memphis Mafia, having the zippin' pippin' all to yourself at 3 a.m. because your boss just felt like riding a roller coaster. It perfectly encapsulated the blend of immense privilege and boyish enthusiasm that defined Elvis's life. Number 4. The karate obsession that led to mid-concert demonstrations. Elvis was passionate about karate. It wasn't just a casual hobby. He trained seriously for years, eventually earning various black belt ranks, though the legitimacy or speed of some promotions is sometimes debated. He incorporated karate moves into his stage performances, adding kicks and stances to his already dynamic presence. But sometimes, his enthusiasm spilled over in unexpected and humorous ways, often catching the Memphis Mafia off guard. Several members, particularly Red West and Sonny West, who were also involved in karate and often served as sparring partners or security, shared stories about Elvis's obsession. He loved demonstrating techniques, talking about philosophy, and showing off his skills. Anytime, anywhere. Imagine being backshed during the frantic energy of a concert intermission. Costume changes, toweling off sweat, quick sips of water, discussions about the set. Suddenly Elvis might decide it's the perfect moment to demonstrate a new kata, a sequence of movements, or practice a specific block or strike. He might grab Red or Sonny or another member, like Joe Esposito, and launch into an impromptu karate session right there in the cramped dressing room surrounded by sequin jumpsuits and nervous band members. Sometimes, these demonstrations happened mid-conversation. Elvis could be talking about something completely unrelated, then suddenly drop into a fighting stance or execute a sharp kick, expecting the person he was talking to, often one of the guys, to react appropriately, perhaps by blocking or dodging. If they weren't paying attention, they might get a light tap or a near miss, accompanied by Elvis's grin. On stage, while the karate moves were part of the show, sometimes Elvis got carried away. He might extend a karate sequence longer than rehearsed, or launch into a demonstration that wasn't planned, leaving the band vamping awkwardly, or the backup singers exchanging amused glances. The Memphis Mafia guys watching from the wings would recognize the signs. Elvis was feeling the martial arts spirit. There's a famous, slightly embarrassing story, often attributed to accounts surrounding the book, Elvis, What Happened, about Elvis potentially splitting the seam of his jumpsuit during a particularly energetic karate move on stage. While maybe not hilarious for Elvis at that exact moment, the image of the king potentially revealing more than intended due to an overzealous karate kick became part of the legend, likely recounted with chuckles by the guys later. His passion extended to sharing it. He encouraged the Memphis Mafia members to train, paid for their lessons, and loved sparring with them, These sessions could happen at Graceland, in rented hotel suites, or even in parking lots. Lamar Fike, not exactly built for martial arts, sometimes found himself reluctantly participating in these demonstrations, much to the amusement of the others. For the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's karate obsession was another facet of his intense personality. It was a source of discipline and focus for him, but also an outlet for his energy and showmanship that could erupt at any moment. They learned to be ready to spar, or at least ready to dodge, whenever the king felt the urge to practice his chops, literally. It was just part of the job description: friend, employee, bodyguard, and occasional unwilling karate dummy. Number 3, the impulsive car buying sprees. Elvis Presley loved cars. Cadillacs, Lincolns, Mercedes, Benzes, Stutz Tackets. He owned dozens upon dozens throughout his life. But he didn't just love owning them. He loved buying them. And even more, he loved giving them away. His generosity was legendary, and cars were one of his favorite gifts. These impromptu car-buying sprees often left the Memphis Mafia members both amazed and scrambling. Imagine Elvis driving past a car dealership, perhaps late at night after a movie or recording session. A particular Cadillac in the showroom window catches his eye. He doesn't make a mental note to come back during business hours. No, according to multiple accounts from guys like Joe Esposito and Jerry Schilling, Elvis would decide he wanted it now. He'd have the driver pull over. Sometimes he'd bang on the dealership door until the owner or a startled night watchman appeared. Other times he might know the owner and call them at home, regardless of the hour, telling them to meet him down at the showroom. Once inside, Elvis wouldn't just buy the one car that caught his eye. He might decide that several of his Memphis Mafia buddies needed new wheels too. He'd walk around the showroom pointing. "Joe, you like that blue one? It's yours. Jerry, how about that convertible? Red, you need something reliable, take that sedan." He'd buy multiple cars on the spot, often paying in cash or writing a check right then and there. Dealership owners were naturally ecstatic to accommodate the king, no matter the time of day or night. One famous story, recounted often, took place in Denver in 1976. Elvis visited Kumpf Lincoln Mercury and ended up buying around 14 vehicles in one go, Lincolns and Mercurys, for himself, some Memphis Mafia members, friends, and even a couple of complete strangers he happened to meet at the dealership, including a bank teller named Manya Alderman, who was just browsing. He just liked making people happy, and giving away cars was a spectacular way to do it. For the Memphis Mafia members, these sprees were a whirlwind. One minute they were driving around. The next minute they were the proud owners of brand new luxury cars. It was incredible, of course, but also part of the slightly surreal nature of their lives. Sometimes they might have already had a perfectly good car, but if Elvis decided they needed a new one, they got a new one. There was also the logistical side. Joe Esposito, as road manager, often had to deal with the paperwork, the registrations, getting the cars delivered or driven back to Memphis if they were bought out of town. It was a sudden influx of major assets that needed managing. These weren't calculated financial decisions. They were pure impulse, driven by Elvis's generosity and his own love for automobiles. He derived genuine pleasure from seeing the look on someone's face when he handed them the keys to a new Cadillac. For the Memphis Mafia, it was yet another example of the king's larger-than-life approach to everything, including shopping. Your boss giving you a bonus is nice. Your boss buying you a Lincoln Continental at 2 a.m. because he felt like it. That's a Memphis Mafia anecdote. Number 2, the police badge collection and the occasional traffic stop. Elvis had a deep respect for law enforcement, perhaps bordering on fascination. He collected police badges from different cities and states, often being presented with honorary badges by police chiefs and sheriffs who were fans or friends. He loved carrying these badges, sometimes had sirens installed in his personal cars, and occasionally, according to Memphis Mafia stories, liked to play the role of officer himself. Members like Sonny West and Joe Esposito have talked about Elvis's badge collection and his enthusiasm for all things police-related. He felt a kinship with officers, seeing them as protectors who worked outside normal hours, much like himself. Having the badges made him feel connected to that world, and perhaps offered a sense of authority or security. The humorous part comes in how he sometimes used this connection. While stories of him actually pulling over speeding motorists might be exaggerated or conflated with specific incidents where he assisted police, there are definitely accounts of him playfully using his authority on his own friends or engaging in mock police procedures. Imagine driving with Elvis, maybe on a quiet road near Graceland. He might suddenly flash a badge at one of the Memphis Mafia guys in another car, motioning them to pull over with mock seriousness. Or, if they were stopped somewhere, he might playfully frisk one of the guys or ask to see their license and registration, using his best official voice before breaking into a grin. There's a well-known incident, though not involving the Memphis Mafia directly, where Elvis, along with Jerry Schilling, actually intervened in a potentially dangerous situation. They saw a man waving a gun during a dispute at a gas station. Elvis reportedly used his car to block the man in, identified himself, showed a badge, and helped de-escalate the situation until official police arrived. While serious, the underlying element of Elvis acting as a de facto officer ties into his fascination. He also loved police equipment. Flashing blue lights were reportedly installed on some of his vehicles. There are anecdotes about him occasionally using a siren, perhaps just for fun when driving onto his own property or startling the guys following him. Picture the confusion of other drivers seeing a Cadillac or Stutz Black Hawk suddenly flash police lights. His collection of badges was extensive and genuine, often mounted in impressive displays. He took pride in them and sometimes wore one clipped to his belt or inside his jacket. It wasn't just about collecting. It was about embodying a certain persona he admired. For the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's police fixation was mostly harmless fun, another quirk of the king. They might roll their eyes good-naturedly when he started playing cop, but they understood his respect for the profession. It occasionally led to funny situations, like mock traffic stops or sudden siren blasts, adding another layer of unpredictability to their daily lives. It also famously led to his impromptu visit to President Nixon at the White House, where Elvis requested and received a badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, believing it would allow him to help combat drug culture, a meeting facilitated partly by his collection and connection. The image of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, earnestly wanting to be a federal agent is in itself a unique and somewhat amusing chapter in his story. Number 1. The water pistol wars that soaked more than just egos. If fireworks were for loud explosive fun, water pistols were for stealthy, soaking wet mischief. Elvis and the Memphis Mafia engaged in legendary water pistol fights that could erupt anywhere, podged in hotel suites at Graceland, even occasionally spilling out into semi-public spaces. These weren't your kids' little squirt guns. Elvis often equipped his army with the biggest, most powerful water guns available at the time, sometimes even modified for extra capacity or range. Accounts from nearly all core Memphis Mafia members mentioned these epic water battles. Joe Esposito, Jerry Schilling, Lamar Fike, the West Cousins, they were all participants. Willing or sometimes unwilling, Elvis was usually the instigator and the most enthusiastic combatant. Imagine trying to have a serious conversation or just relax in a hotel room when, suddenly, you feel a stream of cold water hit the back of your neck. You turn around to see Elvis, grinning, armed with a massive water cannon. The battle is on. Guys would scatter, seeking cover behind furniture, grabbing their own pre-stashed water weapons. Hotel hallways became battlegrounds, suites became waterlogged fortresses. These fights could last for hours. People would end up completely drenched. Expensive clothes, furniture, carpets, nothing was safe. Lamar Fike, due to his size, was often a prime target, leading to hilarious scenes of him trying to retaliate or escape the aquatic onslaught. Jerry Schilling recounted instances where elaborate strategies were involved, ambushes laid, and temporary truces called only to be immediately broken. One famous story involves a water fight that got particularly out of hand, possibly during the filming of a movie or a recording session. Elvis and the guys were going at it with such intensity that water seeped under doors and began flooding into adjacent rooms or studios, disrupting work and requiring frantic cleanup efforts. Studio executives or hotel managers would be furious, but calming Elvis down when he was in the midst of water-fueled fun was apparently quite difficult. Sometimes, the water fights involved more than just water. According to some tales, drinks like Coca-Cola or juice were occasionally loaded into the water pistols for a stickier, messier surprise. Imagine getting blasted with soda. The cleanup would be even worse. These weren't just random skirmishes. They were organized chaos. Elvis often divided the group into teams, directing his side with mock military precision. He loved the chase, the surprise attacks, and the sheer silliness of it all. It was a way to blow off steam, assert his playful dominance, and bond with his friends through shared childish fun. The aftermath often involved sopping wet clothes, ruined hairthols, including presumably careful coifs, and waterlogged rooms needing extra attention from housekeeping. But for Elvis and the Memphis Mafia, the sheer fun and laughter seemed worth the mess. It was another example of how Elvis created his own world with its own rules, where even luxury hotel suites could become splash zones at a moment's notice. If you were visiting Elvis, especially during downtime, you learned quickly. Always know where the nearest towel is, and maybe keep a water pistol handy for self-defense. You never knew when the king would declare war.